You guys have to unmute yourselves.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, hello, hello. As people arrive. So Kameiko, it says Ali.
Yes, sir.
So Ali is your name?
Yeah. There's just like a lot of alleys, so I kind of put my Twitter handle and alley in there in parentheses.
Pleased to meet you in the
You too.
Zoom flesh. There's Angel. Angel, you have to unmute yourself. Guess we'll wait a couple of minutes for
Oh, there we go.
more people.
Oh, yeah, I did it.
Hi, Angel.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to the talking.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, it is Easter, and even though there's a lot of atheists on the thread, people still have families that celebrate holidays, you know?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are some believers in that thread. And I don't know. I don't, really keep track of who believes what, But so people might not show up because of the holiday. But, oh, here's Mark already. Mark Pellegrino. But, hey, Mark. Rose, you have to unmute yourself.
So sorry, then.
Oh, that's okay. And
Hey, Rose.
Hey, everyone.
somebody named L just showed up, but there's no, who's that? Unmute yourself, L, and tell us what your name is.
Oh, it's Leo.
Who?
Lou.
Lou. Oh, Lou.
Hey, Dad.
Cool. I just want to write down the names of everybody here. Wait, we've got Jen, Kameiko, and, Angel. Oh, Rose Richards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and me is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, I didn't write somebody's name I'm missing. Oh, wait. Because I have it on speaker view, I can't see everybody together. All right. Let's try this again. Kameiko, me, Jen, Mark, Rose, Angel, and Lou. Okay. 3, 6, 7. All right. For some reason, I thought there was someone else here. I didn't vote for the topics at all because I didn't want to sway anybody. I vote, but
Oh, it's all right.
the majority of votes were for art. So I don't know if those of you who are here voted for art because I don't, like I said, I don't retain this kind of information. But that's our tentative topic. But we could shift gears if interest goes elsewhere. How you doing, Mark?
Good, man. I'm tired. How are you?
Yeah, I'm a little tired too. I'm okay. Been really
That's
busy
good.
lately. Yeah, I'm really busy lately. So,
I should be busy, but I took up a lot of time yesterday on social media, screaming into the void.
yeah, it can be such a wormhole, man.
Well, it happened because I retweeted Olivia Rondau's podcast. She's a African-American libertarian. She wants to have me on her podcast, and so I figured I'd be supportive of her. And of course, the person who she is having on her podcast is from an organization that is reputed to be anarchist. Of course, she's sort of an anarchist too. And I guess if you're an anarchist, they start associating you with other things too, like white supremacist militia.
Oh,
I don't know if that's actually what these guys buy, but instantly one of my biggest haters came on and said, Mark, I gave you an opportunity to sort of fall in line, and this person is this. She identifies him in her own, according to her own values. and then tried to claim that I was supporting him when I said, no, I'm supporting free speech and my friend's show. And I don't think you should push ideas underground. I think ideas should be everywhere. But, I also think that certain parties, certain ideas shouldn't have political sway. So I said this on a podcast recently that I thought that it's okay to outlaw the Communist Party. It's okay to outlaw anarchists as far as having a political voice, but they can have a voice in the intellectual sphere. They could even organize communities according to or businesses according to their ideas, but they can't afflict the rest of us, involuntary folks in society, with their ideas. So, and the people were freaked out that I was all for banning communism. But hey, it's a violent ideology, collectivist, and it gets its strength by hurting people. So I don't think that has any place in civilization. But we can talk about it. Why not?
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, imposing ideologies on other people involuntarily, that's a kind of violence, especially if it's state enforced, and you deviate from that, you wind up in the gulag. I mean, people who want to defend communism and socialism idealize it, and then they kind of try to explain away history by saying that wasn't really the real thing. That was charismatic leadership. It was totalitarianism. It was this, it was that, it was imperfect, and blah, blah, blah. But they don't make the same excuses for capitalism or democracy when they point to its ills and its historical.
Of course not.
Right. So that's what bothers me the most, the unequal application of principle.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So we're going to talk about art? Is that what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, that was what, how many of you voted for that who were here? Anybody? Just put your hands up.
I'm sure Angel did. Rose did.
Angel and Rose.
Rose, when you said present, were you talking about the present with Frankie, Johnny, and Cody?
Yeah.
I did see that. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm glad that you did.
I don't know that I have it. Charlie just showed it to me.
Yeah, I was talking to him, and then my friend emailed me in that second because it was supposed to be for Christmas, but she had issues going on with her, so it took longer than I thought. So yeah, I didn't want it to be public yet. That's why I sent to him. Okay,
well, you captured it perfectly. You captured their little spirits so perfectly. It was great work. I mean, I see Cody in that Cody picture. That's beautiful. And Frank and Johnny too, and Frankie, they're just perfect. Their little personalities are right there.
Oh, but wait, Mark, it wasn't me. I just made a commission from a great friend of mine. I didn't know that you didn't understand that part.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I don't.
So
I thought that
I just do
was from
photography. I suck at drawing.
Okay.
Yeah. Because she made a draw of my pets a while ago, and then I know how much you love your family, your three cats, sorry. And I thought, okay, yeah, this might be a good present for him. So I buy a commission from her, and there we go.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. She's awesome. She's a fantastic artist.
Yeah, she is. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mark Gleason just showed up. Hey, Mark.
Happy Easter, all.
Yes.
Hello. Are you celebrating the death and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ?
I'm celebrating how Rand's work lives on after her death.
There you go. It's the spring of reason.
Every time someone reads it.
Yeah, well, right on. So who wants to start off talking about art? What are we even going to talk about?
There's so many things to talk about.
One thing I'm curious to hear about is what objectivists say about art. That's my weakest bit of knowledge about objectivism is my minimal understanding of Rand's aesthetic theory and all that kind of stuff.
I'd like to point out that this is Rick's weakest area of objectivism. I'm partially to blame for that, but I did bring him to the Objectivist conference that focused on art, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm only partially to blame here for his lack of art knowledge.
Who was the speaker at the conference? Do you remember?
There was a bunch of us there. I don't.
Ruben was
Oh,
there.
so it was a whole bunch
It was a
of them.
huge conference, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Specific-
it was like all these different papers that you could go, all papers or presentations or workshops that you could pick from, like at a regular convention. So if you went to one, you missed 3 or 4 other ones at the same time. And I did avoid the aesthetic ones because that's just been something that has always escaped me analytically. It's problematic. It's difficult. I don't mean problematic. It's difficult for me to understand.
Well, look,
go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I can kick off with a baseline of my understanding of how my rational brain, how Rand linked art for me with my, reasoning brain. And that is she views art a lot like sex, right? In the sense that you can tell everything about somebody by their romantic sexual choices because the act of valuing someone in that way tells you everything about what somebody values, right? And in the same way, she is how she viewed art, which I believe, which is that you can, I think her example was, you can tell everybody from somebody who loves Waiting for Godot and versus somebody who likes Grease, because of course, at the time she thought Grease is probably relatively worthless.
Steinbold's plumber is showing up right now.
Oh my goodness.
Sebach. I don't know how to say his last
name. So I think that, and Mark can correct me here since he's actually the objectivist artist, but my understanding has always been with this aesthetic is that it is an expression of values, just like architecture in the Fountainhead is a reflection of someone's values are the kind of buildings that they find attractive in which to live in. And so in the same way, your rational values will set the kinds of art you appreciate, and your irrational values will set the kind of art that you appreciate.
Yes, I would agree with that.
MD, can you hear us? Hello, MD.
So,
having difficulty getting in.
Well,
he's never used Zoom before. He mentioned that in the thread just earlier today, I think.
Yeah. So Mike, there's going to be a connect to audio is one step you have to do, and then the mute button in the lower left-hand side is another step. So, and you have the option of also dialing in audio on your phone if you wish.
Yeah, I think there's going to be MD and I think Mark are probably going to be a lot better than I even at translating some of these ideas to other people. But I think why it's a lot like sex, as Mark said, is because art is a concretization of values, and you I guess you demonstrate what you value, as Mark said, by what you put on the canvas or what you choose to put in a story. Your claim, you're staking a metaphysical claim that thing is important. And so when an artist paints a picture that's clear and beautiful and real, they're saying something. And let's say, I mean, one of the great examples that Rand used, Mark, tell me if you remember this, is the painting a woman in a beautiful gown says one thing about the world and the universe, and painting that same woman in a beautiful gown with a herpes sore on her lip says another thing. You're making, as an artist, metaphysical value judgments, and the person who's viewing the art or experiencing the art is experiencing it in that way, and in the sense that through your concretization, they're experiencing a general sense of life, so to speak. Right? Is that sort of the right thing? But
I think so.
That leads a lot of objectivists down like really second-handed paths about what they appreciate in art.
Mike, can you hear us? Sorry to interrupt, Mark. It looks like Mike's speaker and everything is working. Mike, can you hear us?
Hi.
There you go.
Hey, there he is.
All right.
I can just barely hear you.
Anything else?
Gotcha. I'm lucky I got here.
No, we're lucky you got here.
How you doing, Mike? Good to see you.
Because the topic for today is art.
Oh,
and
hi,
Mark Pellegrino said that you're the resident expert on objectivism view of art. So
I think you're far. What? Well, no, I said you're probably far better at articulating the principles than I am.
Than the rest of us, yeah.
My guess, Mark, is You know more about it than I do. You've actually been taking the courses.
Yeah, well, so much for that.
Well, Mike, you were struggling to get in, so you might have had divided attention, and I'll just quickly recap what the two Marks said about objectivism and art. Is that the main idea is that what kind of art you create or purchase or like, right? Whether you create it or purchase it or view it in a museum, whatever, what art you like is similar to what kind of romantic partner or sexual partner you like, in that both of those activities reflect your deeper values. So it's kind of an epistemic or epistemological inroad into a person's character, I would imagine, and the degree to which they have integrity or not, and among other kinds of value judgments based on what their sexual and artistic aesthetics are. So that's what transpired so far, other than a little bit of catching up between who was it, Rose and Mark Pellegrino, about some kind of art that Rose purchased or something like that.
Okay, thanks. I'm having a real hard time hearing. I have an air conditioner running that I have to have running.
Oh.
It's just now shut off for a second.
So listen, do you have a headset?
Is
If you have a headset that you could plug into your device, that'll get rid of the ambient background noise.
Gotcha. Well, I'm not getting any background noise from you. I'm getting it from here.
Well, I know it'll reduce that for you.
Let me see if I can grab. I actually do have that.
So in terms of art, right, I think it makes intuitive sense to us all that sometimes when you're in a dark mood and you see a dark piece of art or you hear a song, which is very dark lyrics, that in some way that resonates with you in that moment, right? You broke up with somebody, you're feeling miserable, you listen to Alanis Morissette and you're like, yeah, she gets me. And so the question is, right, it's a reflection of how you're feeling at that moment. And certainly it's a reflection, by the way, how you're feeling at that moment is a reflection of your values, right? So I think Rand's point is that when you're looking for what's best about man and aspirational about man, that reflects some things. Man as a hero, man as somebody who can create and thrive, and the expression of man's values is about making man great. And I think she juxtaposes that with this idea of man is small and should be humble and should be crushed under the thumb. And, who are you to think you're better than anybody else? Who are you to think that you're better than society or better than God or whatever? And I think she's constantly making this juxtaposition between, man as an end to himself and a hero versus man as man should be this kind of small thing. So I think her point is, if you see a piece of art and it's triumphant and it's aspirational and it's about somebody embracing joy and living, that depending on your values, you'll look at that art and you'll say, wow, that's so inspiring to me. I want to achieve that. Or you'll say, look at that, woman in that painting. She's so full of herself. She thinks she's better than everyone else. She thinks she's, you put on it all those ideas that maybe humans should not be aspirational. They should not be striving to be heroes. They should kind of make sure they hang in the background and not be better than anybody else is. So I think she's always making those comparisons. And I think in art and romantic sexual choices is where that just kind of comes out, because, you're not thinking through it as much. You've already done your thinking on your values. And so now you're simply attracted to things. And by the way, you don't even know why you're attracted sometimes to certain kinds of artwork. You just are. But she says that this is a very, very interesting mirror. And if you find yourself, interested in like nihilistic art, which is about death and destruction of the human species, that you need to do some hard inner work and ask yourself why. And by the way, it happens to us all. You see something and I say, wow, that really appeals to me. That darkness appeals to me. I wonder why. I wonder what is it about that's there for me. So I think that's how she uses art, at least in my view. Mike, did you hear that? Does that sound like something that's in line? Oh, Mike, we lost your audio. Are you on mute?
No, he's not, but maybe his microphone isn't fully plugged in or something like that.
I thought
just unplugged it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay, so if I can hear you, you can't hear me. Got it.
Well, some mics work that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not quite. I really don't know what to say about that. Clearly, you like what you like. Why you do is what you believe, actually believe, not what you think you believe.
That's right.
If that makes any sense at all.
That's right. By the way, Rick, I thought maybe for April Fool's Day, we could start off the podcast with the topic, acting is not real art. Let's discuss. It occurred to me we could have done that, if it was more of an April Fool's joke, but we missed our chance, I think.
Well, you should have conferred with me before we got here, and we could have pulled it off. We could have pulled it off, but.
So, I think a lot of objectivists use this idea of art as a concretization of values, and that it should be representing the aspirational in human life, and it should be clear, it should be representational. They use those guides to choose their art, and they're not choosing from their own gut. They're choosing what they think an objectivist should like. Classical music as opposed to rock and roll or punk, and Vermeer as opposed to Picasso, and they end up not seeing the value in other art as a result of this notion of what constitutes art clouding their vision. I mean, all Rand is saying is art is values. Art is a concretization of values, and that what you value says something about you, right? And that, clarity and composition and symmetry and all those things are true values that you shoot for. But that doesn't mean that there aren't pieces of art that go against that quote unquote standard that aren't good. There's tons of impressionists I think are fantastic, and I love looking at their work. I think someone like Renoir is very aspirational. When you see Renoir's work, his characters glow from within, and he thought art should be beautiful, and he tried to emulate the beautiful. I don't know if Rand would look at it that way, but who the fuck cares? And there's also lots about Picasso that I like. In her mind, he's scattering perception. He's looking at things in a way that a human being can't. He's disintegrating your epistemology. But hell, there's symmetry and there's symmetry to his compositions and a genius with color that is very intriguing to me. Now, she might say, okay, that's decoration, that's not art. Like, she would take a Rothko painting and say, that's decoration, that's not art. But all you have to do is read the play Red, which is about Rothko, and see how much of an intellectual grasp he had on art, and how much conceptual, believe it or not, for a swath of colors, what his ideas were with respect to that. And it gives you a sort of a different outlook on some art that you might dismiss if you have this as your standard. It's a good standard. It's a good standard, but don't give up liking this other stuff, man.
Well, I think there's a distinction there that Rand may agree with, but I certainly agree with, which is that the important thing is why you like it, right? So if you see some impressionist painting, and by which values does it intrigue you? By which values do you like it? That's the important thing, right? Like, it doesn't matter how physically attractive the person, let's say, that you're attracted to is. Why are you attracted to her? And it makes all the difference in the world, right? Like Dominique in Rand's novels, right? Like, so are you with this person because they are attractive and other people think she's attractive and therefore that boosts you second-handedly? Or are you with her because there's other things that are a reflection of your best virtues? So to me, the same way is with art, right? I'm sure you could show Rand, Renoir, or Monet, and say, look, this is not romantic realism, but she probably could find many things about that. She'd say, well, what is it about this that appeals to you? And if you listed human aspirational things, she'd say, oh, okay. Even Grease, which she slammed once or twice, I think, in her writings, the play Grease that was coming out. She's like, this is going to destroy great art. If you said, look, I like Grease, and she said, why? And you caught her in a fair moment, and you explain some of the aspirational aspects of it, she might say, oh, well, yeah, then that is the real art in that piece, right? So I don't know exactly where she would draw the line, but I certainly would agree with you, Mark, that you like what you like, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is important to find out why you like it. You're learning something about yourself when you say, I like this. Let me give you an example. I bought a house and there was 2 houses to buy, and one of them had a nice facade. And because I had read Rand, and because I had had this interest in architecture from the Randian novels, I said, why do I like that one more than that one? And then I said, well, the front facade is stucco or masonry work, and it looks very old. It looks very old. It looks very like it's been around for a long time. That probably kind of, indicates I have some kind of proximity to power. I have old money perhaps, or I'm from from an older family with older money. If I had some vines growing on it, would be even better. But anyway, I'm looking at these 2 houses going, what is it about this one I like so much better than that one? And I realized it was because of these really small things that they add in, which they do for all of us, that say, oh, I like this one better. Why? Because it is indicating something that people want. Now that's something I should not be caring about, right? Meaning, as an objectivist, I should be saying to myself, I need to be careful about this. If I find myself attracted to things that make it look like I come from old money without even realizing it, that wasn't consciously what I was thinking. I just like that house better, right? But I was able to trace to the root of it. And once I started doing that, and I started looking at houses differently, I kind of stopped liking that look after a while. I'm like, I don't like that. It looks like ornamentation to me now. It no longer looks as attractive as it once did. So I think that's the lesson that I draw from objectivism is art is a mirror. And when you find yourself, another example I'll give is being attracted to a person whom I know is destructive. Like when I was in my 20s, I was attracted to, toxic people, let's say. Very beautiful, very toxic, Angelina Jolie type people. And, and eventually you had to say, like, well, what is it about me that attracts me to these kinds of people? This is not healthy. This is not good. I end up in a situation, repeatedly. Let me get to the bottom of why this is. I can't help the fact I'm attracted right now, but let me understand why. And once I did that, I was no longer attracted to those kinds of people. So I think art gives you that same window into yourself. So it's less about the Renoir and more about what you find attractive about the Renoir. And one more, and I'll turn it over. So, for instance, do you like the Renoir because it tells you something about the human soul, or Picasso, that you didn't quite capture before? Or do you like it because it's kind of fuzzy and the world is kind of fuzzy and you like the world being fuzzy or something like that? So I'm trying to draw like a negative kind of, thing where, you don't like a world with clear standards. You don't like a world with clear lines. You don't like a world with clear rules, and you kind of like the fuzziness about it.
But sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Bless you, whoever that is. May Satan bless you.
On Easter.
So, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. You might like that silk screen look. It actually may give a cast to reality that's more romantic and interesting. It's not just fuzzy, right? It's not just I have a scattered epistemology and I don't like being in clear focus. It could be a lot of things. But you're right. I think you have an obligation to examine your values, right? The unexamined life isn't worth living. And I think Rand propels us into that. Isn't that a Socratic notion that we should examine our lives? And that's sort of what it means to be human. I'll tell you it's a quick story. I went to Venice and my wife and I stumbled into this goddamn art gallery, and some pretentious prick who taught art, I don't even know his name, some German cat, had put a display in this beautiful Venetian building, old, 13th century building that had been converted into a museum. And his whole notion was the anti-art, like the anti-composition, the anti-portrait, the anti-painting. And what little symmetry there was in any of his paintings, he'd spray paint a line through it or something horrible. I almost slapped people who worked there and said, give me my fucking €8 back. I can't get this 2 hours back. You pricks, you horrible people. You literally pay €8 to get crapped on by somebody, some pretentious snot. It was gross. I felt so awful walking out of that place. So abused, so violated. Ugh. Imagine that. Imagine being an art teacher and thinking that you're creating something of value when it's by promoting an anti-value. He's actually promoting an anti-value. I mean, how desperate do you have to be to stick out?
Unfortunately, I
Do
think
you think
that's the norm in the art community is the deconstruction of every other norm through art. That's part of the global, ideological pandemic, as it might be referred to, of critical theory,
But it's easy, isn't it? It takes 10,000 years of accumulated skill and thought to give us a car, and it takes one idiot with a sledgehammer 15 minutes to break it all down into nothing.
and then put it in a gallery and say that's art.
Fuck. Oh, geez.
Mike, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I was curious, Mark, do you think this teacher liked what he was doing? Like, what did he like what you hated, do you think?
I think he was making a statement. I can't speak to his what was going on with him internally because he wasn't there. I certainly think he enjoyed. I think people like this actually enjoy the act of destruction. I think it makes them feel a certain amount of power and relevance. If you're going to do that, I think you're doing it for those reasons. So he's a no talent cocksucker who probably feels very impotent in the world. And the only way he could feel some sort of power is by destroying things. Just destroying things, destroying value. As deliberately. It's one thing to create art out of yourself that doesn't stick to any parameters, but you're just creating, you're just flowing, you're letting your spirit flow out. That's very different than this guy. This guy deliberately attempted to destroy symmetry, composition, color, even his I'll tell you what, Mike, if I could tell what kind of person he was, he did do a self-portrait, and I'm just going to presume that the idiotic self-portrait I saw was a representation of him, because what I got from that was a terrified neurotic. A terrified neurotic, probably habitual masturbator.
Define habitual.
I shouldn't say habitual because habitual is okay. I mean, chronic, like
Addicted.
addictive. He's an addictive.
Well, an interesting topic in this area. You have the power of myth, right? And there's really great work on that done by many writers. But this idea that for me to explain to you who you should emulate in our society, you got to be strong, you got to be smart, you got to be clever, you got to be like, what are we trying to prize in our society? And the shorthand way of doing that is with myth or story, right? Be like Hercules. Hercules is great. Oh no, cleverness is good. Be like Odysseus. Odysseus was clever. That's so you tell these stories, and of course they would say that Jesus, since it is Easter, I think it was Jordan Peterson or others have said, Jesus is the ultimate hero because he's also a god, right? So he's the ultimate person you could point to in your society and say, be like that. But the point here is, as humans, I can communicate 20,000, word essay to you on how we should live in society, or I can tell you a parable, and we all just get it, right? And then the next day, something else happens where, again, cleverness, or curiosity kills the cat because, somebody did something they shouldn't have and they got our society in trouble. Well, we tell, a parable about that to our kids. Maybe make sure you don't go do these things. And curiosity is bad now. So this idea that myth is the way that humans really communicate, it's our picture language by which we we communicate, right? That is the power of art, and it is the power of acting, by the way, which definitely is art. You're creating this scenario, creating a world. I think it was, it was a book I read, or maybe it was American Gods, but there was a god that sprang up out of Star Wars because of all the people who believed in the Force, right? In this book that I read. But how did I learn good and evil when I was growing up? Well, I think I was raised in a Christian household, but I learned about Star Wars, right? And good and evil and heroes and villains and how you fight. So art, to go back to what Mark said, is this concretization of these abstractions in some way, because we talk about this virtue and that virtue and how I should do this and how I should do that. That's all well and good, and we all agree. But what's that picture we all can rally behind and say, yeah, like that? and that is art, right? Art is this concretization of this ideas, whether it's summed up in a statue or a painting or in a TV show or in a movie. So I just wanted to open up that as well. To me, that's linked to this way that humans relate to each other through myth and through story and through parable in order to say how we should be. And as kind of proof positive, I think that this art is linked to our values, because when we want to change the values of a society, what do? We tell different stories than what we told before, right?
Indeed. Hey, Rick, have you noticed that almost all of the values in objectivism revolve around epistemology? So ethical values revolve around epistemology and your relationship to the world. Art revolves around epistemology. Is that similar to any other philosophy, or is objectivism unique in that way?
I think it's unique in that way. Yeah. I can't think of another philosophy like objectivism. I mean, that's what's so revolutionary about it. There are precursors in Aristotle and whatnot, and fragments of what Ayn Rand thought were worth keeping from the history of philosophy. But the bulk of it, as you probably know, is it's not predicated on the same foundations at all.
And maybe that's because it's a philosophy for living. So her thinking is, well, we have to orient our minds to living in the world. So anything that orients your mind towards living in the world is going to be a value. And that's why I think the virtues are primarily epistemological. I mean, reason, integrity, honesty, these are all epistemological values. They're about your relationship to reality. Even productivity is a relationship to reality, right? It's how do you combine elements in the world to create new things and to live in the world so that you're creating value. And like Mark was saying, art ends up being an integration. Like everything about objectivism is an integration. It's an integration of knowledge. Her concept is that I think all of your knowledge should integrate into a whole. There shouldn't be any contradictions in any of it. Even things that seem totally unrelated are related to each other by some, circuitous path, and that path should connect somewhere. And art itself is an integration. My acting mentor would say, an ounce of behavior is worth a pound of words. In a single action, you integrate hundreds of words. In a single piece of art, you integrate 10 concepts, 10 virtues or 10 values in a single narrative. So once again, I see her as an epistemological giant and is treating epistemology as probably the highest value. And but so would Plato, right? Wouldn't Plato and Aristotle, even Socrates, say that thinking is sort of the ideal
I think
occupation?
Philosophy is the highest form of art, and maybe what he was saying was what you're just saying now. But like Aristotle divided up the virtues into two categories, intellectual or epistemic ones, I guess you could call them, and the other ones were social, like generosity and compassion and forgiveness and friendliness and all that kind of thing, because he thought we're social animals. So, but our purely epistemological virtues, I think he thinks that they're very important, but he wouldn't play. I don't think he made them primary, whereas Ayn Rand does.
In fact, Rand doesn't consider social ethics at all, really. She considers ethics. She considers it, but it's a secondary thing. It's an extension of what you find in politics. That laissez-faire attitude is the extension of your respect for the epistemology of your fellow neighbors. But ethics is really an individual guide towards living the good life.
Yeah, how should I live?
Yeah.
But Aristotle really was big on us as rational, political, and social animals. So he had like dimensions of his ethics for all of those things. In his book on ethics, the Nicomachean Ethics, which was named after his son, Nicomachus, it was like ethics for my son kind of thing. He actually, I wrote a paper about this when I was in grad school, this one sentence, I was critiquing it. No man, though he could have all other things, would choose to live without friends. It's an interesting claim, but I think it's false. I'd rather have my integrity and have no friends, even if I had all other goods. You know, he said,
that's absolutely true. And there's where Rand beat him. That's where Rand trumps him.
Right, exactly. So,
And I see that happening today. Don't you see people choosing friends over integrity now because there's so much fear in the world? Exactly. I can't tell you the number of people who contact me privately and like, oh, Mark, God damn, you're doing such good things out there. Well, get your fucking ass out there and do it too, because, otherwise they think it's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? They just think it's just me.
Yeah, we talked about this on a previous podcast, Mark, where I said at the college where I work, my colleagues come over and whisper to me near the Xerox machine, oh, Rick, keep doing what you're doing, fighting all the other lunatics in the college. And I'm like, how about a little help? I don't have tenure, Yeah, okay.
Not only that, but some of those very people I've heard from other academics, some of those very people who support academics who are in the sights of these jerk-offs, then publicly turn on them. They'll privately support the academic and then publicly turn on them. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's kind of like telling your next door neighbors who are Jewish, hey man, I'm there for you. But when the Nazis come, you go, yeah, they're next door, There they are.
Yeah. So maybe, well, I don't want to get off track. I was going to get off track.
Yeah, we're going off the art track, but I mean, it's a tangent about values, integrity.
Well, I think an interesting way to look at it that I read at one point was you eat food, you take certain actions to keep your body intact, right? But art is not one of those things that directly keeps your body intact. I think that objectivism says it's not it's not consumable for your body, it's consumable for your mind and your spirit, meaning, so I have this body that I need to take certain actions to continue it, but there's certain actions I need to take for my consciousness to continue in the way that it is, right? So and for that, that's part of the function that art serves. You're feeding your soul, your spirit, in a sense, right? Because let's say that it's a virtue for you to achieve certain things. And there's a piece of artwork that reminds you, well, I have that. I have the artwork of Rand. And when I'm feeling like I'm tired and I just want to mail it in and I don't really want to do a great job, I look at that and I have it to inspire me, right? And what's that doing? It's just reinforcing visually in a concrete way everything that I want my consciousness to continue as. So I eat food to continue my body and I consume art to continue my consciousness. And that's why it's so important to know what kind of food you put in your body, because if it's poison, it will poison you, and what kind of art and thoughts you're putting into your head. Because if I'm consuming nihilistic art all the time, this is going to impact me, right? Be careful who you give rent in your head. So the idea of art as a way of sustaining your consciousness going forward is my claim.
The good analogy with food, with this is delicious food, but it's killing me because it's not healthy, right? So you could be attracted to all kinds of films because you get a rush out of them, but like what you're doing to yourself is you're poisoning your subconscious.
But then I've noticed, I remember Jeff Goldblum saying something about this ages ago. I was over at his house for a rehearsal and he ate very healthily. And I asked him about that. He's like, he couldn't even imagine not eating healthily. Like he just enjoyed it because it was healthy. And the idea that you enjoy food that's bad for you is sort of akin to the idea that you enjoy art or people that are bad for you. It's all connected, right? Once you start to understand how these things relate to value in your life, how health relates as a value in your life, you suddenly start finding yourself taking action and not liking those things that were maybe giving you a temporary fix, but actually hurting you in the long run. You would suddenly find yourself exercising. You suddenly find yourself cutting sugar out of your life. You suddenly find yourself hydrating more because you know that it's a value to your life, and the fact that you're feeding your values, you're feeding your body, actually feels good on a spiritual level.
Yeah, and so you're programming what you spend your time in entertaining yourself at night, if you like watching video things going on, is stuff that's more uplifting or educational than just like sitcom garbage. That's a similar kind of change that you make when you realize that the care of the mind is also part of, it's not just your body, it's not just your spirit, it's your psyche, it's your informational contact with the world. Which made me, one other little thought about blurry, you said, it doesn't have to be like that guy in Germany or wherever that guy was with going out of his way to destroy things. If things are blurry and they lack composition, it might be meaningful for a person at a particular time to see that, because they're struggling with their confused understanding of reality, and they're trying to clarify things. So I remember when I was in Gestalt therapy, I was in training to become one, and we had to be clients undergoing the process, so we knew what it was like. And one of my therapists had a beautiful painting on the wall, which was kind of like discordant. It had some fragments of meaning that was almost like a puzzle, but it seemed to be almost taking form. And I remember thinking, when we were going through the work of me trying to sort out certain issues, that painting captured it. And then I realized that painting was intentionally put there because it captured that kind of thing that happens in her office all the time.
Right.
And I love that piece of work of art, but Ayn Rand might have looked at it, or somebody who, like you said, who thinks, oh, because Rand said this, it could be a certain way, so I'm only going to like classical music, I'm not going to like this other kind of music or whatever, right? They might reject it on some kind of, really, it's kind of copycat principles, copying Rand, rather than have this like secondhand art, secondhand art appreciation, just endorsing what Rand said about things. But it can really be meaningful for somebody at a particular time.
Well, look, but Rand has bad characters, meaning evil characters in her novels, right? It's not all quote unquote aspirational in the sense that, but what makes that okay to her and to objectivism is she's holding up Ellsworth Toohey as a villain, right? This is the contrast that she wants you to see. So to be attracted to Ellsworth Toohey, which I kind of was in the sense that I had somebody in my life who was like a real life Ellsworth Toohey. And so I was a little fascinated with that character. Now, I could say to Ayn Rand, I'm fascinated with Ellsworth Toohey, and she's like, oh, that's a warning sign. Why are you fascinated? And I could say, because it reminds me of this person I know who's toxic, who behaves the same way. And she would say, oh, well, that's good. Yes, you should be fascinated in that way. That's why he's there, to show you the dark versus the light as contrast. If I say, I'm attracted to Ellsworth Toohey because I really think that I want people to respect and fear me the way they respect and fear him, right? Then she'd say, whoa, okay, this is saying everything about your psyche, that this is why you think this was the guy you should focus on in this novel, right? So it's not that, to me, it works the same way with art, right? If I see a discordant piece of art, and it's like that juxtaposition, which kind of highlights some affirmative value, I think that's totally okay in the objectivist sense. If I look at a romantic realist piece and say, see, she's standing near the edge, she's probably going to fall off because she's too busy looking at the stars, right? And I get this nihilistic negative view of it, that would say more about me than it would about the piece. And I think that's the issue. The issue is, what are you focusing on? And is it affirming what objectivists would consider good values or virtues or bad ones?
Somebody else was going to speak before, and we haven't heard from half the folks here. So,
well, you know what, Rick, I was going to say, we could go around and have everybody's talk about, if they don't know what to say on this topic, the area of art that is most meaningful to them. Is it music? Is it movies? Is it painting? Is it, something online? So that's just a suggestion. You're running it. I'm just saying, if people are don't want to weigh in on this particular issue, we always could open it up and hear
Throw
things.
in anything about art or creativity or whatever. Yeah, I mean, this is open exploration. That's why we're here.
One of the things I love about, I'll just go ahead. One of the things I love about Rand's work is that it all sort of reflects what Dagny says at the end, I think, of Atlas Shrugged, where she's like, it didn't really matter, did it? Never really mattered, or whatever she says, something like that. And the idea that even guys like Ellsworth Toohey are incredibly influential and powerful people in the culture. It's like when Toohey says, "What do you think about me?" to Howard Roark, Howard says, "I don't." The idea that evil is really not an oppositional force at all. It's really just sort of a issue of conflicting goods. Like, you know, you get some of these flawed good characters in the Fountainhead that sometimes, like even Dominique and Rourke, that hit up against each other. But the real bad guys, the villains, they're immaterial. They're really impotent. They can't affect good in the long run. And I think that's a very original take, because you always see evil portrayed as an equal opposite power to good, sometimes even more assertive, sometimes more seductive and beautiful. And you see the good as a reactionary force. It's sort of passive. And her idea is that, oh no, good is the only thing that achieves values. Good is the bad is parasitic. It can't live without the good, but it does it as a parasite.
Yeah, a huge message in those two novels. The parasitic nature of evil. It's non-productive. It's parasitic, totally. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's great. All right, somebody else.
Hey, Rick.
Mike, yeah?
That piece that you wrote about all the details about your childhood,
Oh, yeah.
some of your experiences, what I was thinking through that whole thing is you had every reason from your childhood, from your family life, to be a rotten little son of a you-know-what. to be bad, to be evil, if you
Yeah,
so to
yeah.
speak.
The ghetto made me do it, defense.
Right. But you weren't. You still had a heart of gold, even though there was every reason in the world for you to have turned black and to just hate the world and to hate people. But you didn't do that. Instead, you defended people. You defended somebody who's being picked on. You jump in and help them. When somebody in a similar situation, another person in a similar situation that you grew up in would turn out entirely differently. But it's basically the same environment. And I'm always curious as what makes one person different from another, what makes one person good and one person bad, even though they had the same essentially the same environments.
You know what, I think I want to say something about this, because I sort of think that maybe Rick and I came up in similar ways, and for me, it's the presence of what Alice Miller calls the enlightened witness. If a kid has an enlightened witness in their life, just one person in their life, in his or her life, who can promote good or reflect good to that kid, that can make all the difference in the world. I don't know. What do you think about that, Rick, that enlightened witness thing?
That's an interesting claim. I'm sure that it's true whenever there is an enlightened witness, but I never read that theory or heard about it before. I mean, I've heard similar ideas about, oh, well, what made the difference was that one guy, the one brother had, a mentor, the old man down the hall who took him under his wing and liked him, or some school teacher who paid attention to him, and, that kind of thing. And if I think back over my life, that would be a big project for me to try to figure out if there were any enlightened witnesses.
I mean, it could be even at moments in your life that are those pivotal moments. You don't know it at the time, but
Exactly.
where you could turn one way or the other, and something or someone intervenes and gives you the consciousness enough to know. Because I think what the road I was on as a kid, I was heading towards a very violent, fucked up world. I mean, I fought every week. I was like, all my friends, we were all crazy. We were all crazy. And I think I could have been just a complete thug. And some of my friends now are animals. They're freaking animals. And I'm not that way. And I remember a distinct point when I said, ooh, this is not right, what I'm doing. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was my mother's voice speaking to me. She wasn't a moral guide to me, but she loved me. I knew she loved me in her own way. She was really, her and my grandfather, the only people in my life that I knew loved me. And they couldn't do it right, but I knew that they felt that way about me, and they valued me, and they told me that, and they made me feel that. And something about that gave me a piece of empathy to see that what I was doing with other people was wrong. And I decided to change. Like when I was 10, I felt that. I'm like, oh shit, if I go down this route, this is bad. I mean, breaking lights in apartment buildings, fighting with kids all the time, and being encouraged to fight by like my stepbrother's stepbrother. He'd put boxing gloves on all the kids in the neighborhood. And I remember fighting this one Mexican kid, and his mom was yelling, going, yay, yay, yay. And I'm like, hey, let's take these off and let's really go at it, man. And he's like, okay. I'm like, let's wrestle. And I threw him behind this bush and just started beating the fuck out of him. And his mom didn't know I was beating him up. She's like, go, Jose, go. And he's crying, he's bleeding. And I'm like, fucking give up. And he's like, okay, I give up. But that's the route I could have gone down, man. And I didn't. I went the other way. Maybe too much the other way. I don't know.
Well, in Level of Power, we got this idea that you have the herd, and then, particularly when I think bullying is a part of it, because I was bullied when I was young too, and that kind of makes you go away. You say, well, if I just follow the rules my parents tell me, then I'm going to get bullied, and this isn't any good. And so I think you have this split that happens where you end up as a wolf preying upon the herd, right? You just see your worldview becomes everybody picks on everybody else. So I just need the biggest stick, and I just need to be the biggest bully I can. That's just how the world works, right? Or you go the other way and you say that bullies are bad, and I'm strong enough to stand up to them when other people can't, and therefore I need to be some kind of role protector, right? And usually it's because you've seen something really unjust happen in front of you, and you say, I want to be strong enough to prevent that from happening in the future. And so you have this wolf versus sheepdog, right? So you got the herd, and you got the wolves and the sheepdogs. And the wolves and the sheepdogs are always fighting over those who would prey upon the herd. So certainly everything you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that there was that moment, and I'm not quite sure why, to your point, right? But I think, I saw some things happen when I was young, and I said, that's wrong. And I wish I was big and strong enough to prevent that. And one day I will be. And that stuck in my brain, And so I'm not sure if it's an element of that. I think it was for me. But what do you think about that?
Maybe that's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a lot more clear than I was at the moment, Certainly, I saw a lot of violence and injustice in my life, and I was too young and too small to do anything about it. And I look back on those times and wish I were the 6'3", 210-pound guy now facing my dad. Let's see how fucking tough he is now. And there were times later on in my life when men came into my mom's life, I slapped around, because I could, because they were assholes. I slapped one guy, and told him to get the fuck out of the house. And, but that wasn't, but something in my life had robbed me of the pleasure of that meaning protection. So I didn't have that clear delineation where, oh, I'm a sheepdog. I still felt something unresolved, but I knew that I was going in the wrong direction. You know what I mean? And that I had to channel that in some other way, in some more productive way, and use force in a different way to be a sheepdog. But I don't know what I'm trying to say right now. Actually, I'm just sort of feeling around in my mind to get at it. It wasn't so clear for me, and that's why I think even when I've had to be forceful in life with people, it's not necessarily clear in the moment either, you know, because I sort of rejected violence in a way. And when I have to be violent, which I've had to be a few times, I don't feel triumph necessarily. You know, I don't feel like I'm a sheepdog. Does that make sense?
Oh, no.
I still feel a little wolfish.
Oh, that's the problem with being a sheepdog, is that you fear your own power, right? You fear that's the difference between a wolf and a sheepdog, right? Like the wolf just rejoices in being a wolf. Will tear anything his guts out. It's all cool, right? The sheepdog uses power, will kill a wolf and feel bad about it afterwards sometimes, right? And it's because you fear your own darkness, right? You fear, you know that you're kind of wrestling with the dragon here, and it can escape you, and you're a little worried. Like if I get in a fight now, I'm more worried about hurting the other guy than I am about me getting hurt. And that's not a great way to go into a fight, by the way. But I've done a lot of training in my life, and I've had a few fights that went further than I intended. And so now if I'm getting in a fight, I'm more worried about hurting that guy than I am about getting hurt. So, but that's because I don't want to be that guy, right? I don't want to be the guy who just goes out there and destroys and doesn't care. I do care, right? Yeah, and even if they have it coming, I care. You know,
I think maybe with me, there is that monster in me that says I do want to be that guy, and I'm holding it back. I don't know.
Yeah, well, look, I think everybody has that, right? Everybody has that capacity, and some is just more close to the surface than others. And but you can use it as fuel, and you can use it as a drive. But the moment it escapes you afterwards, you go, oh, I don't want to be that guy. I was just that guy, right? I don't want to be that guy. Look, I have interactions where I'm a very forceful personality, and I have business interactions, and sometimes people annoy me, and I try to be very gracious with them, but I just end up, convincing them to do what we need to do because I know it's the fastest way to get something done sometimes. And afterwards I say, I don't want to be, I'm like bullying them with my words essentially in the conversation. And afterwards I go back and examine, and I say, look, I don't think I should have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. And people like Rick say, that's okay because this thing happened. And, but that's what good moral people do, right? We examine our behavior before and after and try to remain true to our spoken commitments, even if we have some energy inside us that's unresolved.
When I was, I don't know if everybody here read that thing that I wrote that Mike was talking about my childhood and all of that. But in that story, the moment for me, it wasn't a guardian angel kind of, what did you call it, an enlightened witness in my life. It was when I had to stand up to this bully because he was pummeling the crap out of me. And I had allowed kids to push me around because I was a pacifist by nature. I was very sympathetic, to other people's feelings. And if I accidentally hurt somebody else, I felt bad about it. If we were rough and tumble playing, boy play, rough and tumble stuff. And so but when Scott was his name was, sitting on my chest and pounding my face and saying, say uncle, there was something in me. I was not going to say uncle. So I wrapped my feet around the back from the behind his neck and bashed his head on the concrete. That was the end of Scott. He got up like a drunkard, and then he tried to actually hit me drunk, and I just pushed him, and he went down again. I felt horrible to see him suffer like that. I thought maybe he had brain damage. I was only 7 years old, but ever since then, I knew I had what Mark said. I have the wolf in me. I have the wolf in me, especially after years of martial arts training. I would get into that. I loved fighting in the ring when I was, at the peak of my, 4th degree black belt. That was fun. I loved it. I liked getting hit. I liked hitting, but I don't want to hurt anybody. So I remember once I was sparring with one guy in the gym. He was this Russian guy, and he was into being strong, and like in the dojo that I trained in, we were all friends. This guy he'd come every once in a while, so we didn't have that kind of connection with him, but he was really strong and he was pretty talented. And I remember he punched me with all of his might and knocked the wind out of me. And I thought, that's not what this is about. This is about technique and practice, Like he wanted to hurt me so he could win the fight. And I don't have that kind of thing. But if it was out on the street, that's a different story, My training was, what do they call my style? One technique victory. If you could destroy the person in one move, do it if you're in a real combat situation. And then so I've got this nature. I'm a Buddhist kind of practitioner, even though I'm not a Buddhist. For like most of my life, I try to be peaceful and loving and kind and compassionate and all that kind of stuff. But I get like when these assholes, pardon me, try this road rage thing on you, that instinct in me, like I just can't stand bullies. I really have to work with my emotion not to fall into road rage because of the wolf in me who just wants to kill these people. Yeah, so it's it's an ongoing thing. I've been meditating seriously, like I'm a serious yogic meditator. I teach yoga and everything for 48 years now. But I still have to be very mindful of this other, like it's anti-bullying is my biggest weakness. Like if I see any kind of bullying, I just want to rip their heart out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So
wow, we got from art to
that was pretty impactful. Yeah. How did we get there? I don't remember.
Well, I think
Mike asked me about how come you turned out the way, and I never really answered him. Here's a short answer. It's free will, man. Everybody makes the choices that make them who they are.
Yeah, but did you ever read Daniel Amen's book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life?
No.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's something to be said about like, and I brought this up in philosophy class all the time in Objectivist Academic Center. I would always be the asshole that would push back and say, wait a minute here, hold on a second. Let's talk about free will for real. Now, if somebody's got, when you, as a kid growing up, if you guys know more about this, you can correct me or tell me where I'm right or wrong. It feels like your body's a reactive instrument. It's an evolutionary instrument. You biologically change with your experiences. And so you have these experiences early on that are setting the chemistry and the synapses of your brain, right? If you don't get the right kind of affection or physical touch, or you don't hear words, that does stuff to the actual composition of your fucking brain, which in turn affects your capacity to negotiate with your free will. You either can and use it to overcome things, or parts of your brain are just too loud and you can't hear the free will. You can't. Your choice, your sense of choice is diminished. And Dr. Amen would discover that when he did brain scans on people and discovered where they had these brain pathologies, some of which came from brain trauma, some of which just came from chemistry problems, genetics, and some that came from life experiences creating these things. Once he was able to adjust the way the brain fired with either drugs, because he was a psychiatrist, or diet and vitamin supplementation, he found that he could then work with them through talk therapy and that they could exercise their free will in a way that they couldn't before. Now, believe me, I'm the guy that's like, I'm anti-Sam Harris. We need free will. I don't want some elitist philosopher scientist adjusting my brain chemistry to make me the right kind of citizen in the freaking world. But there might be something to this idea that, if your brain chemistry is changing, making decisions for you, if your body is doing things to you at a preconceptual stage, and even when you're at a primitive conceptual stage, so you can't really grasp these changes that are happening to you, that sets you, right? That gives you what Rand would say a sense of life, or it sets you in motion a certain way. And it takes an extraordinary amount of work to undo that. Extraordinary.
I agree. I've written about this in my books on free will. 3 books on free will already by now. 1 just on free will and 2 on Buddhism and free will. And the whole idea, I think we talked about this a little bit in a previous conversation about Buddhism and free will, is that meditation is the kind of thing that can help you become self-aware of how you are structured in the ways that you were just describing, that might minimize your free will and enable you through the awareness of it to try to make the adjustments that you could make. But many of us are so mangled by our conditioning, right, and our lifestyle habits and all those circumstances that turned us into the kind of people that we are, that it's functionally as if we don't have any free will. Even though we have the capacity, it's not a developed capacity. It's an underdeveloped capacity. But we can cultivate that capacity through various different things. I agree with you 100% about that.
And I think the culture accentuates that incapacity because, like Rand made it clear to me when she's like, look, the free will is just the choice to focus or not. And when you grow up in a culture that denigrates reason and tells you that your emotions are the standard that you should judge anything meaningful by, then you're not apt to consider focus very important. Right? Especially mental focus, maybe emotional focus, but not mental focus. And so it sort of aids and abets this sort of moral truancy that I'm seeing everywhere.
You mentioned like was there an enlightened witness, but you know what? They weren't enlightened witnesses, but it was interesting. I went to Catholic grammar school and the nuns were such disciplinarians that if they looked at you and you weren't already making eye contact when their eyes gazed at you, you were in trouble because you weren't paying attention. And they said, they used to call me by my legal name, which is Ricardo Repetti. You snap out of it and answer the question. What question? Yeah, that's it. You're going to detention. You'd go to detention that day. You'd go to prison after school that day. So like we were trained, this was not goodwill. Maybe their intentions were good, but just this kind of like these Jesuit disciplinarians of education, if you didn't pay attention, you were in trouble. But if you did pay attention, you learned. So like this is a skill that was indoctrinated in me against my will as a kid, but that carried me through all the way through to my PhD. That ability to just
I think that's right.
Attention. Just pay attention, and then you can learn anything.
I think that's it. That's your enlightened witness, and that's what enabled you to use your faculty.
Only I don't think they were enlightened.
No, but by enlightened, I mean they might not be, but enlightened just means that they open a door for you.
To me. Yeah, they
yeah.
Value. Yeah, that's a great skill, and to me that's the same great skill in meditation. That's why meditation came naturally to me. I think because paying attention. Meditation is attention training exercises.
Right. So is Meisner work. If anybody knows Sanford Meisner, it's a technique approach to acting. And some of the first work you have to do is what they call a repetition exercise where you listen to the other person, you repeat, right? And this exercise can get very sophisticated. It could seem like you're having a conversation with somebody, even though you're not technically, but it's all about listening, not with your ears, but with your gut, like you're connected to the other person, and you really learn by that and by what they call the activity exercise to externalize your focus and to keep it there. And that is what I find most of the great actors who I respect have that faculty of like this focus because, working in film, TV, and even in the theater, it's all about obstacles to personal experience. It's, the camera is here and you're looking at a dot on the matte box. That's not personal. It's not a human experience, or if you have to have a moment when the camera's moving and then it comes there and you're supposed to be with this other person, that conspires against you. So you have to be very, 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 very focused. And that's what I think the best actors have.
That's interesting. There's a contemplative practice called mindful speaking and mindful listening. It's an exercise, and I've had my students do it, where you just say, okay, everybody pair up in groups of two, and there's person A and person B. You guys figure out who's going to go first. And person A just speaks for a minute about whatever the topic is that, the facilitator picks. Some reading that they did or what that experience was like for them or whatever. And person A speaks and person B just listens, and person B is supposed to be completely deadpan and show no approval or disapproval, judgment, surprise, reaction, just so that they can completely minimize any distraction and completely absorb what person A is saying, person B listening. And then the bell rings, and then person B has to repeat back everything that they said, right? It's a really great exercise just to see how well you paid attention, because when you're listening, a lot of times also all these associations and judgments and, distracting chains of thought start happening. So it's just, and then, you do that, A speaks, B repeats back. Then you ring the bell again and B tells A, B's story, whatever this thing is that you're talking about, and A listens, ring the bell again, and then A repeats it back. So both people play both roles. Then the last round is where they can just kind of, after having done that, talk about freely what it was like. It's pretty cool because there's always insights that come out of that.
That's awesome.
Fun exercise. Yeah, my students love it. It's a great icebreaker too. Just get people talking to each other.
Sure.
We should do it here. Okay, Ali, speak for 1 minute about what, I'm just kidding.
Mark, your point is well taken. Certainly, we know Sam Harris's argument, which is, that biology determines a lot, almost everything of what a person is going to do. If you had, Jeffrey Dahmer's brain, you would do what he would do. There's nothing about you different than his brain to do it, is Sam Harris's argument. And I take your point, but isn't that just saying in the great biodiversity of humankind, I may have a hair trigger temper genetically, right? I have to remain true to my spoken commitments. You may have, an alcoholic gene, which means that you are much more susceptible. The level of will you need to resist alcohol is higher than mine. And we all have these various things, right? And so, but that doesn't really impinge upon our free will at all. It simply means that some tasks are easier for me and then some tasks are easier for you. And we all have to play the hand that we're dealt in the best possible way. So,
I would say that, but what if somebody has something like ADHD or something like that, where it's literally almost impossible because of the physiological actions of their brain to focus? And if free will is the capacity to focus, and they don't have that, you have to take, I think, pharmaceutical options, medical options to get them to the place where they have the kind of brain function that will allow them to focus.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about, you have to talk about the examples within the quote unquote normal bounds where will can be a factor. Certainly, if we remove all the serotonin from your brain, or it's precipitously low, you won't be able to function, right? And so there's nothing wrong, I think, as a last resort to chemical adjustment, but because the hardware architecture of your brain is not functioning properly. There could be a variety of reasons why that is, but that's certainly fine. But again, that's not really a question of free will at that point, right? I mean, if I'm not sure if free will is only the ability to focus, by the way, but even if it is, and somebody has chronic ADHD, certainly we give them some medication, but it's almost like, let's say I had chronic pain, tooth pain, right? I thought I was a big, like we all have, I thought I was a big karate man who was resistant to all forms of pain. I won't take any anesthetic until one day I had really, really bad tooth pain. And every single pain mitigation technique I know went out the window. And it was like Christmas Eve and I couldn't, nothing worked. And it couldn't work because when it's my leg that's hurt and I've broken like 40 bones in my life, right? I can use the powers of my brain to mitigate it. When it's a searing, blistering pain in your tooth that's going through your head, I can't even bring to mind what that mitigation technique I had was, right? And so I understand what you're saying. If I'm in that state and you're saying, Mark, meditate, man, just meditate through the pain, right? And maybe there is a way, but certainly the skill required.
And you need the med.
Was unavailable to me. Yes, so I need a little oxy at that time, right, to get through the pain and resolve my tooth pain, so I can get back to the normal mitigation technique. So, but I just don't think that wasn't a free will question, right? That was just maybe it was an ability to focus. I couldn't bring myself to the ability to focus.
Well, by focus, I think I mean the objectivist sense of it. Like, focus means to think. So I think the free will, where our free will comes in, is the capacity to think or not, right? To just let ourselves be free-floating things that float around like a feather on the breeze, every emotional whim, everything that happens in our external environment, or to look at what's happening and decide which way to go.
Yeah, a word that, what was his name? Michael was here last week. He used this word a couple of times, so it's fresh in my memory, is intentionality. So intentionality of your attention and having intentionality in your consciousness is being willful and voluntarily directing your attention and your thought and your focus and your efforts and your energy to what you want to direct it to, as opposed to being carried about by these contingent phenomena that make up your biochemistry, your social circumstances, your economics, all those different things that bob you around on the ocean of life, or having, you know, a propeller and a steering wheel and a, you know, accelerator and all that kind of stuff. You know, that's the difference, the free will. Yeah, and yet, like, it's not just this cognitive thing about attention. You're right. It's broader.
No, but that's why I like the term spoken commitments. Rand doesn't use that term, but I heard it somewhere else and I really like it. And that is, yes, if there is something that interferes with my ability to make a spoken commitment, and that implies some rationality, or at least it implies a method of thinking that can get me to a commitment, and then remember it, right, and be held accountable to it. So if I have some condition where I forget things after 5 minutes and I do something, well, I cannot morally be held accountable because I did not live up to my spoken commitment, right? Now, being a teenager doesn't qualify, right? As not, you didn't take the trash out, and it's because you're a teenager, right? So I'm just saying the spoken commitment, the ability to live up to spoken commitments is available to anybody, regardless of circumstance, regardless if they came from the ghetto or not, regardless of anything, right? Now, unless, of course, there is a medical condition which somehow forbids them from making a commitment and abiding by it, other than mental laziness.
Well, you know, what about this kid in the ghetto? Like, when I grew up in the projects, the bullying thing was one thing, but I ran with a pack of friends who they set the norms for me for a while, you know, like what they thought was normal. And we used to go shoplifting. We'd go to the supermarket and steal candy bars and stuff like that. And it was cool and all that. And like, so that's all I knew. But like, I knew maybe from Catholic school that stealing is bad or whatever. But, you know, having that influence, I was only 7, but then there are people who grow up, like Mark Pellegrino was saying, that under all these circumstances, by the time they're adults, they've never had a moment, maybe, I'm going to tie this in with the spoken commitment thing, where they even thought that they needed to make a spoken commitment about anything. I mean, you can make your commitments whether you speak them or not, but the good thing about spoken commitments is once you speak it,
No. Spoken commitments are even more clear in the ghetto. They're even more clear. You know, the rules, right, will get you killed if you do not live up to a spoken commitment if you're living in bad neighborhoods. So the different kinds of spoken commitments, right? Don't tell the cops. Don't snitch on your friends. There's all kinds of spoken commitments that are reinforced in that setting. That's what I'm saying. So it's understandable that somebody coming out of a post-traumatic stress, being a soldier or a gang member, and they accidentally slap somebody who, not accidentally, but somebody makes them mad in an office setting and they slap them. And they tell me, look, I haven't done that in years. I grew up in, it's what you did. Someone says that to you. I grew up that way. Well, we can certainly, be understanding about that and say, oh, okay, I understand, but to say that they grew up with outspoken commitments is every human society has spoken commitments, regardless of where you are, right?
Yeah, I now I realize you're using it in a much broader sense than I say, I'm going to be a vegan, and that's a spoken commitment. And then I'm going to be
a Crip. I'm going to be a Blood. I'm going to be a member.
Oh, I get it now. Yeah, I misunderstood you. Even though you've been using that phrase since I know you, Mark likes to mention spoken commitments.
I think the interesting thing, though, is that when, and this goes back to R versus K theory, which we won't even unpack that, but when you're young, your body has ways of adjusting to your circumstance. And if you're in a survival situation, your body knows that, and it starts cutting off certain things and making you more mature so you have a better chance to survive. It happens to all animals, including humans, right? So to that point, if the forebrain is kind of the last to develop, where we do kind of our higher abstract conceptual thinking. And if you're growing up malnourished and fighting for your life every single day, that is going to have some impact architecturally to the hardware of your brain, which when you're 25, you're going to be a different person. If you have 2 twins and put them in 2 different situations, their brains are going to look different than when they're 25. So to that extent, now how much of that is useful or not useful, who knows? I mean, it's simply a way of survival. So you're going to be much better at certain things because of that, and you're going to be much better at other things if you go on the other way. So it's not that either is better or worse necessarily. But what I got from kind of Mark earlier was the idea, which I don't think I agree with, the idea that because somebody went this route, things have changed in their brain, therefore that makes perhaps them less able to accomplish, free will and whatnot. And I think no. I mean, I would argue, I push back on that. I would say yes, in the sense that, like we talked about, whether people need medication before they can even have a spoken commitment, but no, in the sense that just because you grow up rough and just because your brain does alter itself from childhood trauma, does not take away your free will in the slightest, nor does it take away your ability to make spoken commitments. In some cases, it probably makes your ability to do that even better. You're more keenly aware of your free will and your spoken commitments because of your rough upbringing.
It depends on the person. Depends on the person. I mean,
Yeah.
like Mike said, Rick, you grew up over in that way. Most people who did wouldn't turn out like you. And in fact, a lot of those people that I grew up with, they're dead or they're junkies or they're in prison, so.
You're in academia. Where do you feel that stacks up against those out there?
Yeah, it's a really weird, circuitous path of
Mark.
A different kind of prison entirely.
Well, you know what it was? When I was in Catholic school, speaking of, it's Easter, and the nuns were telling us stories, this biblical, mythical narrative, I used to question them. Like, how come, what about this? And doesn't God also that? And, I used to debate with them. And so I had that kind of philosophical instinct from childhood. I remember one of the stories was about if two babies die at the beach, one bay apart, somebody who's a Christian walks by and baptizes one of them right after he dies, that baby's going to heaven. The other baby, if it wasn't baptized, is going to this place called limbo, which is like this eternal void kind of place where it's not hell, it's not heaven, you never get to meet God, it's a lonely, quiet, boring place. And I thought, but they're both innocent. I said, but babies are born innocent and God knew that. How could God let that happen, that one of them gets blessed and the other one doesn't? That doesn't seem fair. Isn't God supposed to be good? Right? I was like 7. And a lot happened when I was 7. I fought Scott. I argued with the nuns. So yeah, I have a weird history.
It's scary that a 7-year-old is out thinking an adult human being, though.
Yeah. Well, they were nuns, so they.
Not adult human beings, only in body.
The one common thread between all of these conflicts when you were 7 is you. I just want to point that out, buddy. Wherever you went, there you were, and there was conflict followed.
There's a book about mindfulness called Wherever You Go, There You Are, and the author is John Kabat-Zinn.
Any relation to the academic?
No. Thank God, no.
Hey, by the way, I just want to let everyone know for Easter, I made Hawaiian mimosas. It's champagne, Malibu, pineapple, and grenadine.
Oh,
and
boy.
They are delicious, in case you're wondering what I've been drinking this entire time. And it's basically art, so I feel like it's okay to bring up.
Yeah, well, we lost the thread on art. Maybe we should get back to it.
Well, maybe we could go
We
around.
haven't heard from a few people here.
From everybody.
Let's go around to each person in turn and ask them what kind of art. That was my question earlier. What kind of art do they identify with the strongest? Be it painting, motion picture, TV, music. Now, Rick, why don't you name each person if they're okay with that, and we can ask them that question.
I don't want to pick people to go first.
Okay, I'll start.
Good.
So for me, I identify with music a lot. But to me, it was sort of non-revelation. Like, of course I like this music. I identify with it. It gets to my emotions. It gets to my emotions because these are the lyrics that mean something to me. But what was really like an epiphany for me it wasn't even an epiphany because PBM was the one who was like, look, art speaks to your values. If you want to know why you like the art, figure out what it's telling you about your values. And I had never thought about that before. And that was so eye-opening to me. And it was interesting to hear you guys talking about how it makes kind of like values concrete, because in a way I kind of feel like not necessarily, because the artist might have put their values with, it's an expression of their values, but what I get out of it is different. And as an example, shortly after PBN and I had this conversation, somebody tweeted a picture of I think it was a pencil drawing, and it was a football player running. And I couldn't stop looking at it. And I was like, I love this picture. And I don't like football. I can't name 10 football teams, but I really liked it. And I was like, okay, this is your challenge. You got to figure out why you want to keep looking at this drawing of a football player. And in that moment, and this is what Mark was talking about earlier, in that moment, it was like I was trying to figure out, is he running with the ball to a destination? Or is he running away? Like, this is my ball, and I have to escape the people who want this ball. And I just thought, you're looking at it because this is where you're at right now in life. Are you running toward a destination? Are you running away from something, holding something that you value? And it just, to me, I was like, that's the aha moment. That was the moment of why that was valuable to me. But did the artist person intend for that? I highly doubt it. It was my interpretation. And that also leads me to a question I had for a songwriter that I like. His name is Chris Barron. He's the lead singer of Spin Doctors. And I asked him one day, how do you feel when people listen to your music and your lyrics, and they interpret your lyrics in a way that was completely not even what you intended? And he said, when I write the music, when I write the words, I put it out in the world and it walks away from me. And I thought, gosh, that's, you almost, as an artist, you might have to just have that kind of like, casual acceptance of that's how it is, because we all interpret and integrate things differently.
Wow. I love that story. Thank you.
Good story.
I'd love to see that drawing too.
I think that was a great example of what we just said, which is when you're looking at something, what is it saying about you? It's an ink blot. Everything is an ink blot, right? All the artwork is an ink blot. And so whether you see someone running away or you either see somebody running towards, is all about your values at the time, your mental state at the time. And that's a perfect encapsulation, I think, of what we were saying earlier. I'm going to use that, Jen. I'm going to give you full credit.
Thanks.
Any other volunteers to go next?
Sure, I will. The household that I grew up in was very strict, very anti-sexual, very suffocating, And so I think for me, art is really about rebellion. It's about wildness and craziness and excitement. And this is really the kind of stuff that I like, which I'll try to show you a picture, like, kind of comic booky kind of stuff. I don't know if you can see it, but
that's super cool.
I like comic books. I like tattoo flash art. I like erotica kind of stuff, just things that are the complete opposite of the way I was raised. Because when you're held in chains like that for so long, and then you finally get out in the real world, then, it's kind of like, I like everything the opposite. So for me, art's really about, experimentation and excitement and just, things like that. And of course, I tattoo myself and stuff. So,
Yeah.
So I'm, still doing it.
That's cool. What was that one that you showed us?
Which one?
The artwork, the piece.
Yeah.
Comic thing.
This is Jim Balan's Witch of the Black Rose. It's really good artwork.
It's hard to see. That's okay.
Yeah.
Witch of the Black Rose. That looked very cool.
Yeah. It's you should look it up. It's
He's
pretty
looking
cool
it up.
series.
It looks like he's looking it up right now. That's what Mark does.
I
Probably
am.
going to share a screen in a minute. Make you a co-host, Mark, so you can share the screen. Okay.
Now, have you read the Walking Dead comics?
I've heard of them. I actually watched up to season 5 of the show, so I haven't really gotten into the comics yet, but
Yeah, and the season 5 is about where it started to get a little slow and boring, and then it started to pick up again. So if you're stuck there, push your way through.
yeah. I got to the part where they got to that town, and it's supposedly really idyllic and stuff, but they can't, like, they're so traumatized, they can't get used to living there. And I thought, well, that I can identify with that. That seemed pretty, like, accurate of someone who's gone through trauma and stuff. So
That's what's great about that show. You know, the other humans they face are always the real danger, not the zombies, whatever else is going on. And you understand when they're saying, wait, we can't kill anybody. You got to build civilization. And then you understand later when they're like, we can trust nobody. We have to just be out for ourselves. And as they follow this arc, you know, it's all just them dealing with the environment around them. It's a very human show. I really like it. The comics
yeah, and just when people thought they were safe, they weren't. You know, I felt sorry for all the people in the prison that, you know, they just made it to there, and then suddenly they all get killed off and one epic battle, and I thought, no, that sucked for them, I guess.
I mean, talking about art, right? There's some storytelling about humans surviving a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And good storytelling is, you know, you're able to look at it and go, I want to be that person, or I don't want to be that person, or what often happens with really good writing, I want to be that person. And then as the arc continues, you go, oh, no, that was a mistake. Very good. I think, Ali, you do not need to speak up if you don't want to, but I think you were about to launch into a new topic for us when we segued.
Well, I was going to say that mostly I was pretty much in Angel's shoes most of my childhood, and because I had a very conservative mom who didn't let me do a lot of things. And so I ended up not rebelling because I still grew up fine, not like getting detention or OSS or ISS or anything like that. But when I was looking at art, I was pretty much sticking with things that I knew I would carry over into my 30s. I still listen to the same music, like Linkin Park is my favorite band, so I still listen to them. I still listen to a lot of grunge. I still watch anime. I watch cartoons. I watch TV shows. I watch movies. I read comics. I do a lot of pop culture stuff. I even, like, my entire apartment is pretty much a GameStop if you were to see it. And it just something I enjoy. But the one things that I hated, like, is the controversy around certain topics of art, like comic books, for example, like Joker that came out in 2019. I thought the movie was brilliant, but people, including comic book writers, were not praising it, saying this type of movie shouldn't be released. And I'm like, why not? We got movies like The Punisher, and then we had the Marvel Netflix show, The Punisher. What's the difference between, oh, this shouldn't be released now, considering to The Punisher? And there was this comic book writer called Nick Spencer. He's a very liberal comic writer, and he left Twitter because he got eaten alive by MCU fans and the very people that supported him because he made a fake Captain America Hydra agent. And he said, "Hail Hydra" in the comics, and this was in 2016. At the time, nobody knew because they didn't bother to read the storyline. And when they did read the storyline from start to finish, then you realize, oh, it's not even the same guy. And then you had people like Stan Lee that approved of the storyline, but no, he still got eaten alive. And I hate people that do that, and they just, if they don't want to watch something, then don't watch it, but don't bring in cancel culture to art just because they don't like it. There's people like me. I enjoyed Joaquin Phoenix's performance of Joker. I thought it was brilliantly done. It was a masterpiece. And this is from a director that went from The Hangover to watching Joker. So it's amazing what directors and all that can put into different artworks, and seeing that on the screen. And not trying to diss the Punisher in any way, because he's my favorite Marvel character. But I just don't see the difference why people hate this thing but don't hate the other thing.
I think because the Joker, you're right, Joaquin Phoenix was fucking brilliant, and the movie is a very well-made movie, no question about it. But it's a movie about nihilism, and even the Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker, as much as they try to portray him as a man of chaos, and he's trying to sow the seeds of chaos, he's still going for value in a way. And he's led by a vision, a certain kind of vision, and he's going for it. Sort of like Lucifer, right? Like Satan goes for this vision. The Joaquin Phoenix character isn't going for anything. He's not going for anything. He's just sort of psychotic, and he's marginalized and delusional, and he's really upset, and he just sort of goes where the wind is taking him, and the wind takes him to kill, what's his name, Buddy, whatever his name is, the comedian, eventually, and it just so happens that a movement of other disgruntled, marginalized people sort of springs up out of this insanity, and I think it's an accurate social commentary in the sense of what many people perceive the world to be right now. Like the wealthy are just sort of detached, disinterested, and cold. They don't see what's going on to the vast majority of people who are suffering. And I think it presents a Bruce Wayne's father as that guy who's spitting out cliches about get your shit together, but he doesn't really see what a guy like Joaquin is going through, how he has no life. He's just sort of a cockroach that everybody sort of spits on and tramples on. Even someone like Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, he has a goal. He's directed. He's psychotic, but he's driven by love and the desire to protect a girl's innocence. And there's nothing like that in Joaquin, zero. And so it's a great movie about nihilism, but it does say a lot of bad things, I think, about our culture. And I'd say that as a guy who would watch that. I've seen that movie twice, and I would see it probably again because I just think he's so fucking brilliant. I mean, I feel like Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix are like Laurence Olivier versus Marlon Brando. Laurence Olivier was a technical actor who I never thought really touched himself, unless he did a part where he didn't have to feel much, like the Marathon Man. Marlon Brando was a very visceral, sort of wild, savage guy who inhabited his characters. And that's what I see. I see a technical guy in Heath, and I see this guy who really was that thing. Like I felt for and sympathized with the guy. I mean, he did get me to see something I don't think I'd seen before, or took very seriously, because it's such a dominant message now that he's the norm, and he's the norm. I don't think he's the norm, but it's enabling me to see that perspective of, marginalized, used, taken for granted, not loved, and I thought that's what I got out of it. Yeah. I have to go too, guys, so I'm sorry I have to split, but I have a 5 o'clock podcast for Lost, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Guys,
Cool.
you guys continue to have fun.
See you, man.
All right, guys. See you later.
Bye, Mark.
Bye, Mark.
Bye, guys.
Okay, Rose, you wanted to contribute something about your...
Yeah, actually a few topics, but I was enjoying so much you guys talking about some stuff that I just went through. So first I had a question that I've been wondering myself for quite some time now. When can any form of art can be still considered be art when doesn't meet the required techniques, even though the history, the concept, it's there. So I wanted to, think about this topic.
Yeah, what's the definition of art? You're really asking.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's
I'm a photographer, so I'm always like, it's just, you work with the camera, you just have to push a button and that's it. I mean, no, it's not just it.
My daughter's a photographer, yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. to what art is. But, you know, I'll tell you why it's problematic for me to define something like art. I was on a subway train once, many years ago in New York City, which I lived for most of my life. And I happen to like Japanese wave paintings. Mark knows that because it was my screensaver once when we were working together at something. In any event, so I love Japanese wave paintings. And I'm sitting there and I look up, you know how they have the advertisements above where people sit, these panels that have commercials and whatnot. And it looked like a Japanese wave painting, but it was exquisite. It was like 100 times better than like the Japanese wave paintings are pretty simplistic. They're what you might want to call low resolution representational, right? They don't really capture that much. They don't look real, but they're beautiful anyway, right? But this was like such high resolution representational looking depiction of the same kind of, you know, cascading art form of waves that you see in Japanese wave paintings that I thought for a moment it might be a photograph. And I was sitting across, and I got up. Oh yeah, Mark just shared one, right? So there's an example, right? See Mark's picture there?
I love that.
Yeah, I love them. I have a collection of them. So, you know, I got up and I went over and I'm looking in the corner for like a painted signature or something printed that might be a clue that it was a photo or something. There was nothing on it. And the more closely I looked, I realized it was just a water stain on a blank piece of cardboard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I remember thinking it was so moving. You know, sometimes something captures your attention that you just feel so drawn into it, like the football player, right? Well, that to me, I mean, it looked like Japanese wave painting, which I like. So, but ever since then, I've thought like the distinction between art and non-art is problematic for me because art is artifice. It's something made with the intention of making art. That seems to be maybe almost the only criterion that I could use to differentiate art from non-art. It needs to be intentional.
Yeah, and we are always, every day, consuming any type of art. I personally, photography, music as a second, books, TV shows, name it. So yeah, and art is indeed subjective, I think, in my opinion, because it will differ from the personality of each own. The emotions are there, the feelings. For example, expressionism. Some people look at a painting and say, okay, yeah, it's just scratches, nonsense for me. But for me, it has a feeling, a motive, and I personally enjoy it very much. And when I look to a whole picture of a aristocrat or, I don't know, some god or something, I don't feel anything. Just, it's there. It has the technique. It's well done, but I don't feel anything. And I think for me, art is all about emotions. So what I'm doing, my job up there in the field, working, for example, creating food photography for a restaurant, it has a meaning, a purpose. It's to attract more clients, to build a professional profile to sell. But when I watch a TV show, what draws me to watch it's the premise, the story in there. And personally, I love horror and dramas. I don't know why, but I love that. And I'm a happy person, but I since I was a child, I'm driven to whole kind of occult horror stuff. In music, it's rock, metal, country too.
Why
yeah,
you like supernatural, right?
Yeah, exactly. Look at my shirt. It has a cat devil and I love it. I like this stuff, but I'm a happy person. I'm a happy soul. I don't have any trouble with me, but I don't know. Even my dad once told me, yeah, you were just like that. You just like that weird stuff. And I have friends that don't understand me sometimes because of my tastes. But yeah, I said the same to you. I don't understand why you listen to that crap music or like those shitty romance stories. So yeah, it all comes down to your feelings, to your tastes. So I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a subjective element to almost any kind of art. The analogy that I would make that helps me to understand it is like food and wine. You know, you've got wine critics and wine connoisseurs who could tell you all about the various different, you know, Mark is one of them, you know, all the different qualities of these different wines and all that, and why this one is good and better than that one and all that kind of thing. But you might not like that one, even though objectively from the wine connoisseurs, these are kind of like expert aestheticians of wine, the aesthetics of wine, right? They say these are better than those, but you might like the, you know, the cheap one, but it might be because you grew up drinking that with your friends, you know. There's all these different elements. Same thing with food, right? Then you have the what's called soul food. You might have grown up on rice and beans, you know, with pork chops, your chuletas or whatever, the way your mother cooked it. And so like it's delicious to you, even though it's low caliber in terms of gourmet food, right? You know, you might not really like the gourmet food. So there's that subjective element, but there's also objective elements. But like pinning down the objective criteria, that's something problematic. That's not easy. I want to share on my screen just for a moment. Here's something that Ayn Rand might not think was art. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of my wife's paintings. That's about like 4 feet by 6 feet. It's pretty big. Just an example. I just wanted to share that for a moment.
That's
like
pretty.
It's
yeah, it's pretty.
really good.
I like it very much.
Right. It's pretty, but what is it? But you know what it looks like? Literally, there's like these nebula in space that, you know, that there were pictures
Yeah.
that we've got off of those telescopes or whatever from outer space. It looks like that, but you know, I don't know how to interpret some of my my wife's art.
I think there's a koala bear there if you look carefully.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, this is one of the things I wish Mark Pellegrino was still here, because I wanted to add to it. Like when Mark Gleason brought me to the Objectivist conference, and aesthetics was the thing. I think it was Greg Salmieri. I don't know if you were at this lecture, Mark, who he was talking about music and romanticism and all that. He gave a really pretty brilliant lecture on it, but there was so much going on that weekend that I don't retain a lot of it. Speaking of paying attention. But maybe I just was information overload. But I remember him saying something like this, like it was this thing about what objectivists are supposed to like as art, things that are, you know, clear, you know, symmetrical, all that. He was giving examples from music, and he's like, but you know what, it's okay, like if you like rock and roll music and it didn't really have that or whatever. It was like making excuses for kinds of art that objectivists could like. And I remember walking away with this idea thinking, what, these people know a lot more than I do, like that they are clear on what the objective standards are for art, right? So maybe, I don't know, Mike, can you speak to that for a minute before we go on to the next person?
Well, Rand would say that a blob of color might be harmonious, might be the colors might be complementary, the technique used might be good, but it's not really, excuse me, it hasn't really recreated anything in reality except a blob of color. So it wouldn't have a theme, and she would say that's probably not art.
Yeah,
it doesn't suggest, it's not. She defines the art as a selective recreation of reality. So if what you've created isn't, I wish I'd known this was going to be, the topic was going to be art. I'd have reread the Romantic Manifesto.
Yeah,
but there, depending on what your standard is for art, then you have to decide whether it fits the standard or not, whether it's so. And she wasn't, I hate to say, I hesitate to say this, but she didn't think photography was really art.
Yeah, I know.
Because
I read
it wasn't a recreation of reality. It was actually reality, a picture, just a simple picture of reality. So you haven't selectively recreated anything. You simply copied the reality.
But okay,
So,
can we debate
that's-
a little bit?
Well, but
Yeah.
I want to say this. Look, so if you are a representational artist and you're so good at using paintbrush and color that you can make a painting that looks exactly like a photograph of me, right? You've become the equivalent of a camera in your art. So there's a kind of criticism of that you don't see anything. You've brought no new perspective to it. Whereas if you can distort certain of my features to make me look a certain way, right, that's not in the reality, you might have added something. So you've created something new. On the other hand, in the book about architecture was The Fountainhead, right? She's so critical of people who copy Roman columns and arches and all this. That's why Mark didn't like the house that he bought, because it has a lot of those trimmings in it. I saw that house, right? Mark wanted to take them down because they're kind of, they wouldn't be good in the Fountainhead. I loved the house. I was like, oh man, I love these arches. And he's like, I'm getting rid of them eventually. So but that's complicated to me. I don't, I'm confused by it. That's why I said I still don't really understand this thing. When I was a kid, I used to draw. I mean, I'm an artist myself, not a professional, but I'm an amateur. And when I was a kid, I had a vivid imagination, and I used to draw imaginary beings, all kinds of creatures that didn't exist. I was combining things to create new things. That's creative. That's not representational. So is it not art? One of those creatures like, what was it? Angel was showing us, right? That's not a real creature, but it's interesting. It's, gripping looking, right?
But let's Steelman Rand for a second here.
Okay,
and
please. Because I want to understand what the Steelman is of Rand.
I'll Steelman Rand, and then I'll join in on the, on the bashing. And that is that her point was that in a way of writing or creating a painting of a landscape or this or that, that is different than her little words were adjusting settings on a camera, right? That the going out there and pointing a camera at something and adjusting some settings does not necessarily create art, right? Was kind of her point. Now, we didn't have Photoshop then. We didn't have very many other things then. And I think that cinematography, the science of cinematography and the science of mood, right? Like you see something and you can see the picture, and it's so hard to do. I know because I've tried. It's so hard to set a mood, or like you say, shadows on a face, right? How you choose to take someone's picture will convey you're evil, or whether you're devious, or whether you're positive or whatever. And there's all these different aspects to it. And by her own logic, I think, therefore, if you are not simply adjusting settings, and if you are, I agree with her in that sense, right? Just going out there and taking a camera and going click, 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 click. If there's supposed to be intent behind art, I'm not sure if there's lots of intent in just kind of clicking stuff, right? But if you are trying to recreate something now, by her own logic, if I'm taking a picture of Repetti and I'm trying to make sure the shadows fall on his face in a way that looks half good, half evil, because the way the shadows have fallen, I am trying to recreate something. And I think by her own definition, that would be art, even though I'm using a camera to do it. And as other people have pointed out, and I'll even use a funny example here, because Ayn Rand did appear in Playboy in a very famous interview. In Playboy, they in the old days when they had the centerfolds and stuff, they used to say that they would always put a hint of a man in the picture, right? Because it made it more sexy. So in other words, you have a pretty girl there, right? But the fact is there's not one drink on the table, there's two drinks, as if the man's just stepped away. And that man is you, the viewer of the picture, right? Or there's an ashtray and there is two cigars in it, right? One for her, one for you, whatever it is. There's always the hint of the man, right? And this is what distinguishes certain kinds of photographs where you say, wow, that looks sexy. And other ones you say, I don't like that as much. And I don't know why. And of course, it's because they're trying to invite you to see yourself as part of this picture. So even in the setup of can you say that all that work and all that setup to recreate the human emotion involved in that picture is not art? I would say by Rand's own definition, we'd have to say that it is.
I have no objection to that.
Yeah, the choice of what you choose to photograph and why you do makes it art. But simply, the portrait thing is interesting. The super realistic portrait has a technique. The painting there's a technique involved, and the skill in recreating the reality. The pressing of the button on the camera is not the same as the painting of the portrait. So That would be the difference, I would say, between the picture of someone and a realistic portrait.
How about this then? So, you know, and I'm not a deconstructionist or a nihilist. I'm not trying to destroy knowledge. I'm not a skeptic. But just for the sake of argument, a friend of mine is a professional sculptor. And in fact, there's a sculpture of Adam Clayton Powell Jr. on 125th Street in Harlem, a bigger than life one. I think it's in bronze. He did that. He did the Jackie Robinson statue out at Dodgers Stadium recently. A bunch of these big famous, you know, they're kind of portrait statues, you know, like public figures and whatnot. Suppose he had something like, you know, like 3D technology. Suppose he had some kind of, you know, holographic thing that could like take a picture of you and then like create some kind of cast using a 3D printer of your body from all angles. And then like he fills it up with whatever, it's almost like using materials to go through steps that just recreates you. It takes more steps than pressing a button on a camera. So is it because the camera is easy? You press a button and the machinery captures you? Or he's got all these more steps and then he's still doing the same thing. He's just replicating the geometrical form and filling it with copper or whatever it is that he's doing. Is it the level of labor that went into it that makes it art? It doesn't sound right.
We go by your intention, by your definition of intentionality. Certainly, there's a lot more intentionality in a very elaborate setup, a lot of thought into what you're doing and what you're producing than there is in just hitting a button.
Yeah, there's more, right? But it's not about quantity. Quantity doesn't make something art. I mean, photographers / artists, not like a wedding photographer. I mean, there's not that there's no art in that, but I'm just saying so photographers who are artist photographers, you know, their job is to capture things that are interesting or whatever. They have a tremendous amount of intentionality and they might spend, you know, 10 hours examining nature until they find that little piece of that log or whatever that captures what it is that they're looking for, right? Yep. You don't see all that, but maybe if you say, wow, look at that, what they caught in this picture, right? So they've been out there examining the world. Somebody's mic just made some weird noises. Yeah, I mean, this is why I say it's difficult to define art. You don't want to define art in a way that misses art, right? I mean, what you want to capture everything that's art and include everything that's not art. So, right, that's what a good definition of X is. It includes everything that's an X and it excludes everything that's not an X. But I don't know what the criteria are. I know intentionality is a part of it, but how much effort? I don't know about that. I mean, some people are highly skilled after years of training so that then they go, oh, look at that. And they see something and they take a picture of it. And it's worth putting in a gallery. Because they were lucky at that moment or something, you know. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Here's an interesting one. What's the difference between a toilet, an actual, real, live, physical toilet,
right,
a photograph of that toilet, and a painting of that toilet?
Yeah. Well, a toilet,
reality.
What's interesting about it, what's really interesting about it is that the toilet itself is also a work created with intention, and it's designed to be both functional and to look nice, which is why Duchamp put one in a museum, managed to get it sold for over $1 million. And people paid for that. It was just a plumbing supply item, right? That would normally cost, you know, $20 back in that when that happened.
I remember that.
Pardon?
I remember that. I didn't understood yet why he did that, but it was sold for crazy price.
That was just one of his many. He had a whole collection called ready-mades, you know?
Yeah.
All kinds of ceramic, you know, plumbing items that just happen to be designed to look pretty. But, you know, this is part of the deconstructive skepticism creeping over art. that there's this ideological, cultural thing going on where, like, among artists in the art world, you know, there's the history of all these different stages of different types of art. And in the last, you know, so many decades, it's been, you know, more and more postmodernists deconstructing and trying to, like Mark Pellegrino said earlier, literally destroy the definition of art and expand it and undermine it. And that's part of this anti-boundaries, anti-clarity, anti-knowledge, you know, skeptical wave coming over society. So, you know, on the one hand, I'm inclined to say, well, I never want to say something's not art that an artist made, intending it to be art, right? But like Mark Pellegrino was saying, that, well, what about art that's made to destroy art?
We have that.
That leads me to my question, if you don't mind me asking.
Please.
Sorry, Rose. What about Banksy? Because remember, like, so a lot of his artwork, what was it, 2 years ago? He painted something and went out for auction, and it went for $1 million. I don't remember the price range. I know it was like billions of dollars. He put it through a shredder halfway. And I never understood the purpose of that. And I know Banksy is really famous for his graffiti artwork. I just never understood the point of why he did that. If anybody knows what I mean or follows Banksy's work.
Yeah, I think that's the point that I just made. It's like pushing the boundary. Like, how else, you know, okay, a blank canvas, that's art. You know, throw literally feces on a canvas, that's art. Have a big clear glass jar with urine in it and a painting of Jesus in there and call it Piss Christ. I mean, that's a real piece of art that, you know, all this. So it's part of the postmodern attack on meaning, on differentiation. All knowledge is predicated on duality, on differentiation. You know, anything that has meaning, there's an inclusive and an exclusive sense, right? A cat is what it is, and it is not anything that it is not. So everything that there's a definition of has an inclusion and an exclusion criterion, right? So the postmodern skepticism is trying to eliminate all those boundaries because that will completely undercut knowledge, completely. And that's what it's at. I think that's what's going on. I've been reading the book because next weekend we're going to have, what's his name? James Lindsay is coming to this podcast next Sunday. Well, he said he's probably going to be able to make it. We'll see. He's slippery. But I've been reading his book. Thank you, Mark. Mark gave me the book, Critical Theories. I'm on chapter 3 or 4. I forget which one. It's fascinating. Did you read it? Did you guys read it? Anybody?
I have to pick it up.
Yeah, I'm about the 3rd chapter myself.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's an excellent history of what's been going on with postmodernism from like the 1960s up until the 2010s and right up to now. But what was that other guy? He was an objectivist who wrote a book called Postmodernism, Stephen Hicks. That's another fascinating book. In that book, he talks about art and how postmodern art is using art as a way to undermine those symbols that Mark Gleason earlier was talking about, myths and symbols and meaning, right? What, you know, stories around the campfire, all the stuff that makes our world intelligible and orderly and meaningful to us, right? Through, you know, you said we change the narrative if we want to change society, so that changing art is a way of doing that too. That's why
I think Rand's point is art has to have a definition. It has to be something specific. And if otherwise, if anything is art, nothing is art. So, and the deconstruction thing is like, let's get rid of the definition of art. We don't need a damn definition. Anything I feel like is art, damn it. You know,
and anything I feel like is knowledge, damn it. That's standpoint epistemology. That's subjectivism, right? I feel it, therefore it's true. On the other hand, like Angel was saying, because she grew up in such a restrictive, structured, you know, value-laden, you know, this is right and that's wrong, and she embraces anything opposite of that. So I don't know. this, you know, I don't want Angel to feel like her art doesn't count as art. Because no, but
I got to go, folks.
her art has meaning to it. All right, take care, Mike. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
I'm gonna
Appreciate
be
it.
leaving
Good
in
to see
about 10
everyone.
minutes. Yeah.
Nice to see you, sir. You know what, Rick, before we do, I'm not sure how much longer we're all going to go. It's a holiday, and I don't want to put any pressure, but Miss Lou, we have gone through
Absolutely.
everybody. And it may have been before you joined, but we were going through and talking about what art is to us. Do we like music? Do we like paintings? Do we like movies? Or what is the art that kind of inspires?
Photographs.
Or photographs, that's right.
Or comics.
There's no pressure whatsoever, but if you'd like to share with us what is art to you, and what is it that you like to interface with in the artistic world?
Yeah, sure. I like a bit of everything, but I suppose paintings will be the thing. Anywhere I travel, I always try to go to an art gallery, have a look around. I'm one of those people that just stand there and stare at apparently nothing for ages and just take it in. So I suppose that's my thing. I guess something I've found interesting in the last year or two since I've been reading a little bit of philosophy is I've been asking more, like, what do I like this? What is it about this that I like, and trying to connect it to my values. And the strange thing is that some of the things I used to like, I couldn't answer. And for some of the things, I don't like them anymore, because when I've started to pull that apart, it's like they've kind of lost the meaning. Now, other things have gone the other way, and when I've started to look into it, I've really appreciated what I saw in them. So I think that is kind of interesting to me, the fact that when you do start to analyze why you like something, for me, it changed how I looked at things.
I love that story. That's great. That's right where we started out, right? Like, Mark was pressing after defining the main thing about objectivism and art is that it represents your values. Check your premises about why do I like that, right? So yeah, that's a brilliant strategy. I love that methodology. If I got nothing else from today, I'm going to be doing that at my side. And what I was thinking about is that, I like a lot of music that I grew up on, like soul food. I grew up eating those things, so I love them. Even if it's not good for me, it's not on my diet or whatever. But same thing with music, like. And I'm like, I'm not a kid anymore. I'll look up the lyrics to a song I've been listening to my whole life and realize that, I'll hear it on the radio now, because now I'm checking my premises a lot, and I'll go, I don't even really know what those lyrics are. I know a couple of fragments of the words. I don't really think I know what that means. And I'll look it up and I'll go, oh my God, I've been singing this song all my life. It's stupid. That's it. I can't enjoy that anymore. Right. Yeah. So that it does work. This check your premises thing. That's the work of integration, though, that if you really, whatever are the problems there might be with objectivism, if you just get that part of it and apply it in your life, I think it'll really make major positive changes in your life.
Yeah.
Check your premises.
Yeah. And I think on the photography that Rose was talking about, for me, the difference between just a photo that's, I don't know, not art and one that is, it's kind of one that tells a story. If the photo is just, I don't know, realistic, it's just somebody has taken a photograph, they've just captured what was there. It's not necessarily art for me, but when you start telling the story and you've done something, whether it's with the scene or the setup or how you've used the light in a special way, then it becomes that. Because I've seen some of Rose's photographs and there's a lot that I would say really is art there. But there's something, I guess it's something above reality. There's something that's been done, whether it's been with the way the scene has been set or maybe some processing afterwards. I don't know specifically what it's been on the photographs I've looked at, but there's something that takes it beyond just the picture that I would have taken.
That's an interesting thing to add to your definition, Mr. Repetti, is that intentionality to tell a story somehow captures art in a way that intentionality alone, for me, does not, right? Because to me...
Intentionality has to have meaning.
Yes, so intentionality is to tell a story, and a human story, right? Because it has to be human relatable. I suppose. Even when you're showing an animal, you know, where we anthropomorphize, right? So
Meaningful to us, yeah.
yeah, well, I'm just so some intentionality with meaning. I don't know. There's some key there. I think that, you know, telling a story is what
Story
great art
is complex. So if a photograph tells a story, then it's very meaningful. But so that's a quantity issue. There might be intentionality and meaning, but the meaning might be not so structured as to count as a story, but it still might be meaning. And we're like that, you know, Jen read into the meaning of that football player, stuff that may or may not have been in the intentionality of the artist. So that's that subjective thing. That was it Rose or Ali who said it's subjective? I forget.
It was yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the fun
the other
part.
side of it. Like there's the artist's intention. You know, postmodernism say the death of the author. I forget one of these postmodern philosophers who wrote like an article called "The Death of the Author" or something like that. That's the joke, like that. You know, the author's intentions don't matter. Like there was a funny movie with was it Rodney Dangerfield? It goes back to college with his kid or something like that, and
I remember that movie.
yeah, he has to write an English paper. So like he goes, it was who wrote Slaughterhouse Five? Kurt Vonnegut. He gets Kurt Vonnegut, the author, to write the paper about his own book, right? He's cheating, he's plagiarizing, and he hands it in as his English paper, and it gets like a C- or something, right? It was like, that's a joke about English teachers, that they could care less. You know, the author doesn't matter. Author's intentions don't matter anymore. It's all about your perspective, your take on it. But, you know, Mark, Level to Power is all about perspectives, right? There's multiple perspectives that you could take on certain things. So it's really complicated. Yeah, we could add some things to the definition. You could work on this issue, art. We could have this meeting about art for a year, I think, and not define art. It's so multidimensional. It's multiple. I mean, there's the artist intention. There's
And when we get to analyze each type of art, from cinema to photography to paintings, poetry, everything, it's different.
Yep.
But
Movies,
the feelings are there, the message is there. I think that's what the creation that makes art. I think it's that.
Yeah. I think meaning is key.
Yeah.
Intention. It doesn't have to. I mean, when we could break it down and say, look, when we want to evaluate whether or not something that someone created counts as art, when we're analyzing that question, intention matters, right? But when we're talking about how people interpret art, that's a different conversation, really. It's a different conversation. But Lou said hours, I forget how much time you said you could stand in a museum looking at a piece. I don't know if I mentioned this last week or not, because I'm talking to a lot of people lately, but I think I might have said it last week. I have an art teacher friend who said she supposed to teach a survey class, which is, I don't know if you've ever taken the intro to art class, where, you know, they start out with the ancient art, they go through all the periods, and you see Greek columns, and you see Baroque art, and, you know, all these different kinds of art and whatnot. And you just hundreds of slides all semester, and the teacher's analyzing them, and you're going to take notes and remember all this stuff. That's a survey class. Instead of doing that, in the survey class, she shows them one painting the entire semester, that same one painting, and makes them behold it and just look at it every single day and interpret it and try to separate the difference between what they bring to it, how they're interpreting it, what they actually see. You know, there's so many different levels of it. There's the color, there's the structure, there's, you know, and she says that her students are like professionals whenever they go into a museum, because they've learned to do all the kind of epistemological work to sort out the feelings that it conjures, the cultural knowledge that I'm bringing to it, what the artist might have intended, all these different things. So those are all the skills that they develop when they do that. That's another dimension of art, right? It's not just the object. Okay, here's this thing and it's art. right? There's also this whole other dimension of what we bring to art and what we take from it. I mean, isn't that part of the meaning of it, in a way?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say like pre-production, production, and then post-production. What drove the artist made that piece, what the person feels when, even the artist, many artists don't like their work.
Right.
I struggle myself in looking to my past work saying, yeah, no, I don't identify myself with that anymore. So I'm always improvising, learning, do better, changing how I photograph, because it's funny, when I photograph, I don't tend to represent the reality. I change it through settings, edition, even using elements, pick one. It's a vast topic. We could be here hours and hours.
Well, I guess it's been 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
It is Easter, and some of us have families waiting for them to have dinner with them and whatnot. So awesome. This was fun.
And every year around this time, Rick goes back to the water stain that has the wave on it. Light some candles. There's a little gathering around it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have a happy Easter.
Yes.
Thanks, Rick, for
Thank
coordinating.
you.
Thank you,
Happy holidays.
folks. Great to
Happy
meet
Easter,
a
everyone.
couple of new
Y'all
folks.
too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.